Okay guys, so taking a quick look at reps in reserve and the principle of reps in reserve. Now, if you've never heard of reps in reserve, you would somewhat be able to tell by the name that it's essentially a measure of how many reps that you have left in you before you reach the point of complete exhaustion where you can't physically perform another rep. So say for example, I am doing bicep curls and I could do 10 reps before I reach the point of complete failure. My biceps have no energy left. I cannot physically perform an 11th rep no matter how hard I try. If 10 is my absolute maximum, then when we talk about reps in reserve, it's essentially how many reps before that point we purposely leave on the table, we purposely don't perform. So if you could physically do 10 reps, like I'm obviously describing in this example, if you were to purposely stop at 9, you're then leaving 1 rep in reserve. If you stop at 8, 2 reps in reserve, and so on and so forth. Now, this is essentially a principle that can be deployed in someone's training in order to manage how much fatigue someone accumulates. Because essentially, the reps that are the closest to failure, that failure point within a set, are number 1, the most stimulating for muscle growth, but also the most fatiguing. And in some rare cases, you can deal with an individual who is so strong that they lift so much relative to their body weight, and in particular could potentially be doing exercises that are extremely high fatigue cost. Like say for example, you have someone doing a hack squat with hundreds and hundreds of kilograms and they're pushing really close to failure, then the fatigue cost of doing a high fatigue cost movement or compound movement like a hack squat, especially when someone's really strong like that, sometimes if you allow them to train or encourage them to train all the way to failure and beyond without holding back in any sense, they could in some cases cause more fatigue than we would like and essentially limit how much progression that we see. Okay, so essentially we don't need to get into the weeds of all the different contexts where reps in reserve might hold or offer some validity and some benefit. I would say for the majority of cases, we don't want to train with reps in reserve, although that's a different conversation. But reps in reserve, in my opinion, do have some very valuable benefit in specific contexts with specific individuals. But essentially, it's when you are being prescribed to train and purposely leave however many reps is specified in the tank. Now this does mean that you need a pretty good gauge of how many reps you've got in you. So you need to be quite experienced with training, and if you know you can do 10, you need to be quite accurate with that assessment. A lot of people out there, they think that they have reached a failure point way before they've actually reached a failure point. So there's obviously a little bit of development and experience required in being able to assess how many more reps you've got in you. Because if you can't assess how many more you could possibly do, then it's hard to hold back to a specific number as well, a specific number of reps in reserve. But essentially reps in reserve is just when we specify how many reps we would purposely want someone to leave in the tank essentially in order to manage fatigue, but still make sure that they're getting a good stimulus, but make sure that we're basically protecting week to week strength progressions. Now, also, this could be useful in situations where you've just started a new block of training, and for example, you're doing the first week and you still don't really know the exercises, or maybe you do know the exercises, but it's in a new sequence or new rep ranges or new training styles in general, then typically leaving 2 reps in reserve can be good advice in the first week of a new block of training to essentially just allow yourself to hold back slightly, to get a feel for the block of training, and then the weeks onwards from that week, the second week onwards, you can train a little bit closer to failure as is best prescribed in your program. Okay, so essentially that's reps in reserve. We don't use it often, but it can be a great tool. Because essentially when you are prescribed to leave a specific number of reps left in the tank, and the reason is just to manage fatigue in order to make sure that we protect week to week progressions within your program. Okay, so that is reps in reserve.